Jungkook tightened his grip around the strap of his bag, inhaling deeply as he stepped into the office building for what was supposed to be one of his last days. He had planned his exit down to the last detail. His resignation had been submitted, his flight was booked, and his apartment lease was ending in a week. Everything was in place. But fate had a cruel sense of humor. The moment he walked into the conference room, his breath caught in his throat. There, sitting at the head of the table, dressed in an all-black tailor suit that hugged his frame perfectly, was him. Kim Taehyung. His ex-boyfriend. His new boss. Jungkook had heard whispers about a company restructuring, but he never imagined Taehyung would be the one taking over. Their eyes met for a fleeting second, just long enough for Jungkook to see something flicker in Taehyung's dark gaze before it disappeared behind a mask of indifference. "Mr. Jian." Taehyung addressed him smoothly, as if they hadn't spent years tangled in each other's arms. As if he hadn't whispered Jungkook's name in the dark. "I look forward to working with you again." Jungkook's heart clenched, but he forced a polite nod. "Likewise, sir," but he knew. He knew this wasn't going to end well. Jungkook should have moved out months ago, but their apartment lease had been under both their names, and neither had bothered to break it. It was stupid. A mistake. But somehow, neither of them had truly let go. That night, Jungkook came home late, exhausted, emotionally drained. He walked into the bedroom, fully expecting Taehyung to have taken the guest room or, better yet, to have moved out now that they were officially nothing. But there he was. Taehyung was sprawled on Jungkook's side of the bed, one arm resting where Jungkook used to lay, his scent still lingering in the sheets. The sight sent an ache straight through Jungkook's chest. "Taehyung," he whispered, voice tired. "You're still sleeping here?" Taehyung didn't answer right away. He turned slightly, eyes half-lidded, voice husky with sleep. "I couldn't sleep anywhere else." Jungkook clenched his fists. "You need to move out." Taehyung didn't respond. He simply closed his eyes again, as if Jungkook's words meant nothing. And maybe they really didn't. Because despite everything, Jungkook still crawled into the other side of the bed that night. Jungkook had done something incredibly stupid the next morning. He had let himself hope. Taehyung had still been there when he woke up. He had turned over in his sleep, unconsciously wrapping an arm around Jungkook's waist, just like he used to. His warmth had been so familiar, so heartbreakingly safe, that Jungkook had almost let himself believe Taehyung wanted him to stay. So that morning, he made a decision. Maybe he would reconsider. Maybe he didn't need to leave after all. But then, it happened. During a company briefing, Jungkook had stood beside Taehyung, their arms almost brushing. The air was thick with unspoken words, heavy with something unresolved. For a second, Jungkook wondered if Taehyung would finally say something real. "Stay, don't go, I still love you." But instead, when Jungkook reached for Taehyung's wrist instinctively, Taehyung shook him off. Then, right in front of him, Taehyung turned to his assistant, flashing a small, charming smirk, and leaned in just slightly too close. "Do you have plans after work?" Taehyung asked, his tone light, flirty. Jungkook's blood ran cold. His breath hitched. No. Taehyung wouldn't, but he did. He ignored Jungkook completely, as if the past 5 years had never happened. As if they hadn't just woken up in the same bed that morning. Something inside Jungkook cracked. And for the first time since their breakup, he realized, maybe it was time to stop hoping. Maybe this time, he should be the one to walk away first. Jungkook stood frozen, his breath caught in his throat. The sound of Taehyung's smooth, flirtatious voice wrapping around words meant for someone else made his stomach churn. The assistant giggled, tucking a strand of hair behind the ear. "I don't have plans yet, sir." Jungkook clenched his fists. "Sir." The same title he had used for Taehyung that morning. But while it yet felt suffocating coming from Jungkook, Taehyung seemed perfectly fine hearing it from someone else. He should have left. He should have walked away and let Taehyung continue whatever twisted game he was playing. But he couldn't. Instead, he scoffed, voice sharp. "Didn't know office relationships were encouraged here." The room fell silent. Taehyung slowly turned his head, eyes meeting Jungkook's. There was no surprise in his expression, no guilt, no hesitation. Just cold amusement. "Only when they don't interfere with work," Taehyung said smoothly, tilting his head slightly. His lips curled, just enough to taunt. "Is there a problem, Mr. Jian?" Jungkook swallowed down the lump in his throat. Was there a problem? Yes. There was. The problem was that Taehyung still slept beside him at night, held him when he thought Jungkook was asleep. The problem was that he still smelled like the past, still left traces of himself everywhere Jungkook turned. The problem was that he acted like Jungkook was disposable, but never really let him go. Jungkook forced a breath through his nose, willing his hands to stop shaking. "No, sir," he bit the words out. "No problem at all." Then he turned on his heel and left. If Taehyung wanted to play this game, fine. But Jungkook refused to be the only one losing. Taehyung watched Jungkook walk away, his heart pounding in his chest. He should have been satisfied. He had pushed Jungkook away like he planned, like he needed to. So why did his fingers twitch with the urge to reach out? Why did his chest ache at the way Jungkook's jaw had tightened, at the barely hidden tremble in his voice? The assistant was still looking at him expectantly, but Taehyung barely heard a word they were saying. He wasn't even sure why he had flirted. No, he knew. He wanted to see if Jungkook still cared. And judging by the way he had stormed out of the room, he did. Taehyung exhaled slowly, pressing his fingers against his temples. "You're being selfish," a voice in his head whispered. He knew that. Jungkook had been ready to leave, to start fresh. And Taehyung, who had been the one to break things off in the first place, should have let him go. But when he had seen Jungkook in the office today, looking so determined, so done with him, panic had gripped him in a way he hadn't expected. So he did what he did best. He hurt Jungkook before Jungkook could hurt him. And yet, that night, when he walked into their apartment, the bed felt unbearably cold without Jungkook beside him. Jungkook didn't come home that night. Taehyung waited. Kept the lamp on. Listened for the sound of the door unlocking. But it never did. His stomach twisted. His fingers clenched against the sheets. This was what he wanted, wasn't it? But when dawn broke, and Jungkook still hadn't returned, when Taehyung's phone remained silent, no missed calls, no messages, he finally understood. Jungkook was really leaving this time. And this time, Taehyung wouldn't be able to stop him. Jungkook zipped up his suitcase, hands steady despite the storm raging inside him. His chest felt hollow, like something had been ripped out and replaced with nothing but exhaustion. He had given Taehyung too many chances. He had let himself hope, let himself believe that maybe, Taehyung still wanted him. But last night, When Taehyung didn't even call, didn't even try, Jungkook realized he had been fooling himself. This time, he wasn't going to wait for an explanation. This time, he was leaving first. Taehyung had barely slept. He had paced the apartment all night, checking his phone, expecting, hoping, for a text from Jungkook. But nothing came. By morning, his patience had snapped. He had always been the one in control, the one who made the decisions. But now, for the first time, he was the one left behind. And that wasn't something he could accept. Without thinking, he grabbed his car keys and headed straight for the airport. Jungkook had just passed security when he heard it. Jungkook, the voice was frantic, desperate, and painfully familiar. His heart lurched. His steps faltered. But he didn't turn around. He couldn't. Then, suddenly, a hand grabbed his wrist. Jungkook inhaled sharply as he was spun around, face to face with Taehyung. His ex-boyfriend. His new boss. His everything and nothing all at once. Taehyung looked wrecked. His usually composed exterior was cracked wide open, hair tousled, breathing uneven, eyes dark with something Jungkook had never seen before. "Don't go." Taehyung's voice was rough, desperate. Jungkook swallowed hard. Why his voice shook, despite how much he had promised himself he wouldn't break. "So you can keep playing with me? So you can sleep beside me at night and ignore me in the morning? So you can flirt with someone else while I was never playing with you?" Taehyung cut him off, his grip tightening. His eyes were burning now, no longer cold, no longer unreadable. I didn't know how to." Jungkook wrenched his wrist free, stepping back. "You didn't know how to what?" Taehyung inhaled sharply. "I didn't know how to lose you." Silence crashed over them. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of airport announcements and hurried footsteps faded into the background, leaving only the weight of everything they had left unsaid. Jungkook's chest ached. "You already did." Taehyung's lips parted slightly, eyes widening, like the words had physically hurt him. Jungkook turned around, stepping forward, but then, Taehyung moved. He grabbed Jungkook by the waist and pulled him in, crashing their lips together in a desperate, unspoken plea. Jungkook's eyes widened, his breath catching. He could taste the regret, the longing, the words Taehyung had never said. For a moment, he let himself sink into it. Into the warmth of Taehyung's lips, the familiar way their bodies fit together. But then, Jungkook pulled away. Taehyung's hands stayed on his waist, reluctant, trembling. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Stay." Jungkook searched his face, trying to find something, anything, to hold on to. But all he saw was a man who was too late. His throat tightened. "Goodbye, Taehyung," and this time, he walked away without looking back. 6 months later, the city lights blurred outside Taehyung's office window, but he barely noticed. The whiskey in his glass had long gone warm, untouched as he scrolled through his phone, through the messages he never sent, the calls he never made. Jungkook was gone. Not just from his life, but from the city. He had truly left this time. No trace of him remained. No accidental meetings, no familiar scent lingering in their apartment. And Taehyung, who had once believed he could control everything, was utterly powerless. He had told himself, "If Jungkook leaves, I won't chase him." That had been a lie. Because every night, he dreamed of him. Every morning, he woke up reaching for someone who wasn't there. Every time his phone rang, his heart clenched. hoping, just maybe, it would be him. It never was. Until one night, 6 months after Jungkook had walked away, his phone did ring. And this time, it was a number he had memorized like a prayer. Jungkook. Taehyung's breath caught in his throat. His fingers hovered over the screen, afraid to answer, afraid not to. Then, finally, he pressed accept. Low, his voice was hoarse, unsteady. A beat of silence. Then, a familiar voice, soft, hesitant, but heartbreakingly real. Taehyung. The way Jungkook said his name felt like a wound splitting open, like something long buried finally coming to light. Taehyung closed his eyes, gripping the phone tighter. "Where are you?" he whispered. Jungkook exhaled shakily. "I don't know." A pause. "But I think I want to come home." Taehyung's heart slammed against his ribs. His grip on the glass tightened until his knuckles turned white. He should have played it cool, should have taken his time to respond. But instead, he answered immediately, voice raw, desperate. "Tell me where you're," and this time, he wouldn't let him walk away.